Hello and greetings to you. I want to thank Reverend Sriraj Mohanty and the pastorate committee and other leaders of your church for giving me an opportunity to bring this message to you today. Today's theme is purity of heart. And so it is appropriate for us to look at the biggies, the big problems of the heart, like lust and greed and other things. But what the Lord has laid upon my heart is to speak about a different aspect, a different emotion that could be a cause of several troubles for us. And this emotion is pride. This emotion is pride. And I believe that God has led me to speak about this because this is one emotion that can derail our walk with God in a very significant way. So, last evening when I was preparing this message, most of you know Leslie, my wife, she asked me, what are you going to speak on? And I told her, I'm going to speak on pride, and she smiled and said, that should be easy for you. And I, in my naivety, answered her, yes, darling, I have plenty of material to speak on that particular topic. And she smiled again. And that's when it hit me and I got it. She was not referring to my ability to preach on the topic of pride. She was referring to the pride that I had in me. And she knew that I had plenty of it, and she knows best. She's been living with me for the past so many years, right? Pride. Do we have it? If any of you do not have pride, then you don't need to listen to the remaining part of this message. You could probably fast forward it and go to the next section of the worship. But if you believe that you have this, maybe this is a time for you to, help the Lord, help God to examine ourselves and tell us what He wants us to tell, what He wants to tell us about this topic. So let's look at this. What's wrong with pride? Is there anything seriously wrong with pride? Is there anything wrong with being proud of being part of an institution like St. Thomas Church, which is close to about 200 years old by now? I understand it was founded in 1830, so in another 10 years' time, we would be celebrating our 200th anniversary, right? So is there anything wrong with being proud of being part of such an institution, right? Or is there anything being proud of our families, our heritage, and things like that? Yeah. So there is a positive pride that is harmless, but not just harmless, that could also be actually beneficial, right? But that is not the pride that most of us suffer from. Most of us suffer from a pride that talks about I, me, and myself. Most of us suffer from a type of pride that I call as the self-promoting pride. It's a kind of pride that wants to take all the credit to ourselves. It's a kind of pride that wants to keep on saying, look, give me attention, right? Pay attention to me. It is the type of pride that wants us to make the center of attraction of everywhere that we go, center of attention wherever we go, and things like that. It is that kind of pride that I want to speak to you about this morning. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, maybe some of you have heard about him, C.S. Lewis. So he has written this book called Mere Christianity. And in this book he quotes, let me read from him. He says, according to Christian teachers, the essential vice, the utmost evil is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that are mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. It is pride which has been the chief cause of every misery in every nation and every family since the world began. Sounds rather harsh, isn't it? Sounds rather harsh. But could this be the reality? Could pride be the utmost evil, as C.S. Lewis puts it? And he says, actually, C.S. Lewis even goes to the extent of saying that even unchastity or anger or greed or drunkenness are nothing. He says they are flea bites compared to this problem of pride. So he says that is the utmost evil, right? Let's look at a biblical story about pride to probably illustrate this, right? Let's turn to Daniel chapter 4. In Daniel chapter 4, a beautiful story is told about a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar has, and no one is able to interpret that dream, and then ultimately it falls on Daniel, and Daniel, of course, is able to interpret it, and then Daniel explains the dream to him and also gives him a ray of hope. But it looks as though as though the king forgets about Daniel's interpretation of the whole dream and the effect that the dream could have. Right? Just about a year later, the king goes to his balcony. He surveys his kingdom, and then pride builds up in his chest, and he grows proud. And he says in Daniel 4:30, I quote Daniel 4:30. He says, the king spoke, saying, is this not the great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty? Is this not the great Babylon that I built by my great power for my majesty, for my dwelling? Wow. Just note the self-praise in this verse. Just note the attribution of all successes to himself. Just note the number of times the words I, me, I and me are used in this short verse. That is what pride does to us. It attributes everything, every success to ourselves, right? And what we do by this is we edge God out completely. We edge God out completely out of our lives when we have pride. And that is what Nebuchadnezzar did, isn't it? He said, look, everything that I have built, and it is for my majesty, my dwelling, right? And so he completely edged God out of the equation, and he sort of attributed all the successes to himself. And of course, we know the result of this. Even the Bible says that even before these words left, whatever he dreamt earlier came to pass, right? And he loses his sanity. He eats grass like an oxen. He is wet with the dew. His hair grows like that of an eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. This was what the dream was all about, and what the dream predicted comes true because of his pride. We should think about the story every time we are tempted to take credit for our successes in our lives. Right? We can always, criticize Nebuchadnezzar and say he was a very proud man. But look at ourselves. This morning, let us look at ourselves, right? Every time we look at our wealth, our fame, our position, our degrees, right? I have a PhD, and my wife actually, has given a good expansion for this. She says it is permanent head damage, right? So I can be proud of my degrees, my qualifications, my position, my wealth, my wisdom, whatever else it is. We can feel puffed up when somebody praises us. Somebody comes and says that, look, hey, that sermon was great. You feel great about it, right? Or you can even feel proud about what you did. You could feel proud about the number of people that you have helped. So, etc., etc. So we can all feel proud of what we have accomplished. And when we do that, we are just edging God out of our pride, and we fall prey to such temptations. Now, you may ask, hey, hold on a minute, right? We're talking about the example of Nebuchadnezzar. This guy is not even a believer. He was a pagan, right? He was not a Jew. He was not believing in Yahweh. And so he was a pagan. So why bring a pagan example into this, right? Well, we know that our spirituality itself sometimes, our religiosity itself could be the cause of our pride, right? We know all about the spiritual pride as Jesus, as Jesus explained it in his parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, right? All of us know about it, or you can go and read about it in Luke 18:9-14, where Jesus talks about this, the spiritual pride of the Pharisee as against the humility and the brokenness of the tax collector, and we know which one is better, right? So you can go ahead and read about that. But let me quote you from another great leader, another great preacher, Jonathan Edwards, right? So Jonathan Edwards, right, in his book, The Works of Jonathan Edwards, he says this, I quote, "The first and worst cause of errors that abound in our day and age is spiritual pride. This is the main door by which the devil comes into the hearts of those who are zealous for the advancement of Christ. It is the chief inlet of smoke from the bottomless pit to darken the mind and mislead the judgment. Pride is the main handle by which he means Satan, has hold of Christian persons, and the chief source of all the mischief that Satan, introduces to clog and hinder a work of God. Spiritual pride is the mainspring of, or at least the main support of all other errors. Until this disease is cured, medicines are applied in vain to heal all other diseases." Unquote. Harsh words, but it's true. We could be proud of our spirituality itself. We could go around and say that, look, I am a church-going person, and so I don't need to, and I'm proud of that, right? That itself could be a problem, right? So this morning, let us examine ourselves. What is our pride? What are we proud of? And where are we edging God out because of our pride? Are we attributing all our success to ourselves? Are we attributing are we saying that, look, it is I who achieved all this? And if the Lord leads us to that realization, the antidote to pride is humility. Humility is a funny thing, Humility is not something that we can go advertising ourselves about. We can't go around with a placard saying that I'm the most humble person in the whole earth. Or we can't, just by starting every sentence by saying, "in my humble opinion," we don't become humble, right? Because we might as well end the sentence by saying, "in my humble opinion, you are the worst idiot in the whole world," right? Humility is not something that can be claimed. Humility is something that has to be lived. It is others to observe humility in us, right? And we don't have to look anywhere else to look at examples of humility. Jesus Christ is the ultimate example of humility. God Himself, knowing that he had all the powers, right? In John 13, 1 to 17, he does this. He knows that it was on the night that he was betrayed. He takes off his outer clothing. He wraps himself with a towel. He goes around with a basin. He washes the feet of his disciples, including the disciple whom he knew pretty well is going to betray him soon afterwards. And this he did knowing that he came from the Father and all authority has been given to him from the Father, knowing that what authority he had, right? That is the example of humility that we are asked to follow. Jesus Christ, he gave this "not so with you," a specific command, "not so with you," to his disciples when he said that, guys, in Matthew 20, 25 to 28, he said, look, you may have power, but not so with you. You shall not use your power to rule over or exercise authority over others, but instead you shall serve them, because I, the Son of Man, came not to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. That is the example that we have this morning. about pride. So wherever the issue of pride hits us, let's remember Jesus' example and let us ask God to help us to examine ourselves, understand our pride issues, and seek His help to replace that pride with humility. Humility that Jesus Christ demonstrated. Let's ask Him to purify our hearts. Thank you.